We've been doing too many violent films lately, so here comes Herbie, baby! The protagonist of the movie is a white Volkswagen Beetle named Herbie. It is a special car, which has a brain of its own and can interact like humans. A few months ago, it had taken the racing world by storm. Despite being significantly smaller and weaker than other racing cars, Herbie won all the competitions it participated in. However, age finally caught up to it. After a few accidents, Herbie struggled in some important races, and as a result, it was sold to a junkyard, where it got addicted to diesel. Later, we see it arriving at the place in a trailer. The owner of the junkyard, Dave, believes that it is old and useless, so he decides to demolish it. However, Herbie doesn't like the idea. In order to dissuade him, it starts playing several pranks on him. First, it releases gas on Dave's face. And then pours oil on his expensive shoes. These pranks are hardcore. Herbie even throws some of his parts onto the man to annoy him. Despite the weirdness of the situation, Dave and his employees are not going to give up so easily. They try to grab Herbie by its chains and take it to the shredder, but it proves to be an impossible task because Herbie is a car. When the men get tired, Herbie seizes the opportunity to escape, but it doesn't reach far as its old and rusty tires give out. Dave, who is now impressed by the Beetle's resilience, decides against demolishing it. The scene then cuts to a graduation ceremony where hundreds of students are present. Maggie Peyton is one of them, and her dad, Ray Sr., is extremely proud of her. He says that she is the first one in the family to graduate from college. As the two engage in conversation, we get to know that Maggie's entire family is invested in car racing. Her grandfather was a legend of his time, while her brother is a struggling racer who is trying his best to make it into NASCAR. Instinct. During her college years, Maggie also dreamt of becoming a racer one day, but that all changed when she was involved in a minor accident. Now, her father has strictly forbidden her from racing. He is instead focusing on grooming his son, Ray Jr., for the upcoming NASCAR event. Unfortunately, the latter isn't very good at the sport, and he usually ends up crashing his car. What a disappointment he is. The following day, Ray Sr. decides to give his daughter a car as a graduation present, but since he cannot afford a new one, he takes her to the junkyard. As soon as Herbie spots the girl, he decides that he wants to go with her. Herbie is down bad. Hopefully, he doesn't give her Herbies. To make this happen, he pulls out every trick in his bag. However, she still doesn't notice him. Maggie instead chooses a Nissan car, as she likes its design. After a while, Herbie is lifted by a crane to be transported elsewhere. At the same time, Maggie is on the verge of sealing the deal for her new car. Herbie doesn't like this, so he strategically falls on top of the Nissan, destroying it completely. This leaves Maggie with no choice but to go for the Volkswagen Beetle instead. Following this, she gets inside the car and starts inspecting it. All of a sudden, the glove compartment opens by itself and reveals a note inside. It is from the previous owner, which says to take care of Herbie. Maggie then turns on the engine, and as soon as she does so, Herbie begins driving on his own. It turns and swerves in a reckless manner, causing her to scream in terror. After a while, it takes her to the local garage, which is owned by a guy named Andy. Turns out he and Maggie used to be friends in school. Andy quit his studies to support his family, while Maggie pursued college and eventually graduated. He is seeing her after a long time, and it's evident that he likes her. Herbie thinks about committing vehicular manslaughter. Andy offers to refurbish the old car, but for that, he needs to check it out first. The two friends then get inside the vehicle, hoping to have a normal ride, but just like the last time, Herbie goes crazy and starts driving on its own. This time, it even showcases some impressive stunts by driving on its rear wheels. Soon, the group accidentally ends up in a sports car exhibition. Tripp, the reigning NASCAR champion, is giving out autographs to his fans. He appears to be a national hero who is looking forward to winning this season as well. In the meantime, Herbie keeps honking because he's horny and he wants Maggie to drive him away. However, this only annoys her, so she decides to turn it off. She tries to unplug some wires at the back, but Herbie retaliates by spraying oil on her clothes. Luckily, Andy finds some racing gear in the car's trunk, which Maggie reluctantly puts on. Shortly after, Tripp spots the Beetle and mocks its appearance. He jokingly asks Maggie to return return it to the circus where it came from. Herbie says, "I'm not from a circus, I'm from a dump." Hearing this, Herbie is enraged, so it scratches Tripp's expensive car with its rear mirror. This act baffles the fans, and they ask Tripp to teach the driver a lesson. They are unaware that the car is actually driving on its own. Maggie desperately tries to get out to apologize, but Herbie locks all the windows and proceeds to the start line. Soon, the race begins, and Herbie's gears start moving at a rapid pace. It then takes off on its own, scaring the life out of Maggie. At first, both the participants go toe-to-toe with each other, but Tripp soon uses his dirty tactics to derail Herbie off the course. This angers Maggie, and she finally decides to team up with the Beetle. The latter also allows her to take control, and together, they catch up with Tripp in no time. Despite being an old and rusty car, Herbie seems to be very fast. It also uses some unorthodox maneuvers to dodge Tripp's attacks. During the final moments of the race, Herbie cleverly climbs onto the safety bar and secures the victory. Volkswagen Beetle, more like Volkswagen She. This shocks the entire crowd, as NASCAR champion Tripp has lost to an unknown person in a Beetle. That's so embarrassing, they should probably kill him. The following day at home, Maggie overhears her father shouting at her brother. It turns out the latter has lost yet another sponsor due to his poor performance. At this rate, the family's going bankrupt because they have no other source of income. After a while, Ray Jr.'s final sponsor, Sally, shows up in her yellow VC Beetle. When Herbie spots the car, it is instantly smitten. Now she's got some junk in her trunk. Meanwhile, Sally shows Ray Sr. some footage, which turns out to be of the same race from yesterday. She points out how the white Beetle outclassed a NASCAR champion. At first, Ray Sr. is happy because he notices that the car is the same one he bought a few days ago. But then, he becomes disappointed that his daughter has started racing again. When he confronts her about it, Maggie cleverly lies that it was her friend Max who was driving the car. In reality, Max was just an imaginary guy, but he quickly goes viral because of his supposed win over Tripp. On the other hand, we see that Tripp is still reeling from the loss. His assistant tries to make him understand that street races aren't important, but Tripp wants revenge. He then asks his team to organize a 2-day competition, knowing that it will lure Max out. Meanwhile, as Andy and Maggie are spending some time in the garage, they come across an advertisement for an upcoming competition. The reward is a whopping $10,000, which, adjusted for inflation, is like $3 billion. This excites Andy, and he requests Maggie to give it a thought. He also offers to refurbish Herbie with his personal earnings. If they win the competition, they will split the cash prize in half. Maggie is still hesitant about the idea, as she had promised her father that she would never drive again, but also because 50-50 is bullshit. But then she remembers that her family's going through a hard time financially. This ultimately persuades her to race again. Following this, Andy immediately gets to work on Herbie. He removes the old rusty parts and replaces them with new ones. He also paints the Beetle to give it a fresh look. After the process is complete, Herbie looks dank. It's surprising that Herbie's a car because he's looking bussin'. After the process is complete, Maggie starts training for the big day. The scene then cuts to the day of the competition, where a large crowd is gathered. When Tripp notices the refurbished Beetle, he gets a bit anxious. He later approaches Maggie and asks her where she met the driver Max. However, she completely changes the topic and leaves. After a while, she dons her race gear and sneaks inside the car. The competition rules are then announced. For the first phase, the drivers will be competing against each other. The winner of this phase will get to compete with Tripp the next day. Soon, the race begins, and the participants struggle to claim the top spot. They push each other, use dirty tactics, and even resort to violence. But in the end, the partnership of Herbie and Maggie manages to win the race. In the next scene, a restless Tripp is seen researching the mysterious Beetle. When he zooms in, he notices that the driver has long red hair. This makes him realize that Max is hot, but also that Max is probably just a pseudonym, and it was Maggie driving the car all along. That night, he meets her outside her room and engages in conversation. He then hands her his sports car keys, allowing her to ride it. As soon as he departs, Tripp tries to tamper with Herbie, but the VW Beetle sprays oil all over his face, foiling his plans. A while later, Maggie returns with the sports car, and Tripp decides to raise the stakes for tomorrow. He proposes that whoever wins the race will take the loser's car in addition to the 10 grand. Maggie, who is desperate for the money, immediately agrees. She is confident that Herbie will showcase his usual antics and win the race for them. Unfortunately, the Beetle overhears their conversation and feels betrayed. It feels like Maggie is only using it for her gain. So, the next day, Herbie decides to teach her a lesson. As the final race begins, it takes a significant lead, and the crowd believes that Max is going to win. However, just before they reach the finish line, Herbie abruptly stops. Maggie tries her best to operate the beetle, but it just won't move. Unfortunately, Tripp takes full advantage of this and wins the race. He then approaches Maggie and asks her to reveal her face to everyone. Humiliated and left with no options, she obliges. Maggie's dad, who is in the audience, is shocked to see her there. 10 times out of 10, this guy would be stoked that his daughter was driving so well, but instead, he chastises her for breaking her promise before storming away. After a while, Andy approaches Maggie to console her, but Tripp interrupts their conversation and reminds her about the bet they made last night. He then says that he is taking the beetle away with him. Hearing this, Andy feels betrayed, as Maggie made this decision without consulting him. Hence, he also storms away. In the aftermath of these events, Maggie is on her way home with her best friend. She is completely broken and doesn't know what to do. Just then, it strikes her that she lost the race because she had tricked Herbie. Had she not made the bet, they would have won the race already. Hence, she decides to make it up to Herbie by rescuing it. Through Tripp, she learns that the car is about to be destroyed in a monster truck competition. So she rushes to the arena and gets on the field. It is a very risky move, as Maggie could easily be crushed by the giant trucks, but she is determined to save her best friend. When Herbie notices her, he comes back to life and immediately springs into action. He throws away his current driver, who is immediately run over by another truck, and then saves her from an approaching truck. After Maggie is in the driver's seat, they destroy some of the monster trucks before making their escape. In the next scene, they arrive at Andy's workshop, and he is taken aback to see the car's condition. Nonetheless, he forgives Maggie, and the two friends reconcile. Andy also promises to fix the car for her. The next day, Maggie and her family go to watch Ray Jr.'s practice for the upcoming NASCAR competition. However, he performs poorly and ends up getting into yet another accident. This time, it is serious, as the doctor informs him that his eyesight has been affected. Now, with Ray Jr. ruled out of Sunday's big race, he pleads with his father to let Maggie take his place. However, Ray Sr. vehemently refuses, stating that he is not willing to take that risk. Ray Sr. is the one with the eye troubles. That night, Maggie is at Andy's workshop, discussing their current situation. She still wants to take part in the competition, but Herbie is totally banged up and needs a lot of repairs. Andy unfortunately doesn't have the funds to order the new parts. Just then, Ray Jr. arrives at the garage with his entire team. They quickly get to work on Herbie, and overnight, the white VW Beetle is refurbished into a brand new racing car. The scene then cuts to the race day, which is being broadcast live on television. You're telling me the other ones weren't? As Tripp is giving an interview, he spots the white Beetle and gets anxious. He asks his men why they didn't destroy the car, but they reassure him that it's of no threat. Soon, the race begins, and all the cars accelerate at their top speeds. When Ray Sr. spots his daughter on the television, he gets initially nervous, but seeing her performing so well, he decides to head to the venue to cheer for her. Meanwhile, the race has reached an exciting point. Several cars have ganged up on Herbie and are stopping its progress. This frustrates Maggie, but as soon as she is about to give up, she hears her father's voice on the radio. He motivates her to keep going, as he believes that she can win it, unlike his failure of a son. Hearing this, both Maggie and Herbie are riled up, and they become determined to win the race. To get out of the tricky situation, Herbie climbs on top of a car and drives over it. Now, with only half a lap remaining, Tripp and Maggie are tussling with each other for the top spot. Tripp once again resorts to cheating and continuously rams Herbie with his car, but at one point, the Beetle moves out of the way, causing Tripp to strike the wall. This causes his vehicle to flip over and get into an accident.
Yes! Probably broke some bones, yes.
Herbie is meters away from crashing against the car, but it miraculously drives on the fence and secures the victory. With this, Maggie becomes the first female to win a NASCAR championship. She celebrates with her family and friends, while an injured Tripp complains that the Beetle is alive. Andy also expresses his love for Maggie, and the two finally kiss. The movie ends as Herbie finds the love of his life, the yellow Volkswagen Beetle. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.